Who's heard the phrase, never say never? Do we believe in that phrase? I know a lot of people don't, but last year the Chicago Cubs won the World Series, and there's a lot of people that thought that would never happen. I used to be one of those people. I'm not anymore. When I was 22 years old, I started my career as a firefighter. I loved it. It wasn't even like going to work. It was like going to a big Boy Scout convention. Everything in my life at that point was going according to my plan. I had a nice tight hold on my career. Everything was going perfectly. One day I was at a barbecue, and I started having some light dizziness. I went home and laid down. The next day, the dizziness was still there. So I went to the doctor, and my doctor said, it's probably vertigo, maybe an inner ear infection. So she sent me home. The next day I woke up, the dizziness was completely gone, but I couldn't hear anything out of my left ear. Didn't seem like vertigo anymore. Went to see an ear, nose, and throat doctor. He said, yeah, it's probably an inner ear infection, but I'm going to send you to an MRI just to make sure everything is going okay. Okay. So I'm in this MRI machine thinking, how in the world did I get in here? Next day, I got a phone call from my doctor. That's usually not a good sign, by the way, if you get a phone call at home. She said, you've got an acoustic neuroma brain tumor, and you need to get in to see one of these 3 neurosurgeons right away. Okay. Didn't really see that in my plan. So, went and saw a neurosurgeon, had brain surgery a couple months later. So there I was, going according to a different plan all of a sudden. But I didn't see that coming. I never thought that I was going to have brain surgery, lose my hearing, wear hearing aids. But I kind of figured that everybody has that one story in their life that changes the direction a little bit, and that's going to be my story, that, the one that you tell over and over and over again to people. So I figured that was mine. At 33 years old, I'd always taken a proactive approach to going for my yearly physical. We have a heart history in my family and high cholesterol, so I thought, I'll be proactive, but I didn't smoke. I stayed in somewhat decent shape, and by that I mean like a small pear or a skinny Homer Simpson type shape. So while I was there, she said, well, is anything going on? It's like, well, my wife at the time thinks I pee too much. She's like, what? Like, as a firefighter, we tend to pee a lot, because the last thing you want to have happen to you is being stuck on a call and have to go. So we tend to go a lot, or I should say very often. She's like, oh, that makes sense. Let me do a prostate exam while you're here. I'm like, so we did that. She's like, well, there's some blood here. Have you been having any bleeding? It's like, yeah, off and on. She's like, it's probably an internal hemorrhoid. I need to send you to a gastroenterologist so he could take care of it. Okay. So off I go and see a gastroenterologist. So as I'm there seeing him, he's like, yeah, I'm sure it's an internal hemorrhoid. We need to do a colonoscopy to make sure that that's what it is, and we can take care of it there. So he must have seen the concerned look on my face. He's like, what's up? I'm like, well, the last doctor that told me a test was going to be nothing, I had brain surgery a couple months later. So he's like, it'll be fine. So we scheduled the colonoscopy. I'm at the hospital, and he comes into the room before he starts the procedure and just see how I'm doing. He's like, I'll talk to you after the test. So I wake up, and I see this look on his face of just somberness. I'm like, what's going on? He said, we had to stop the procedure. Oh, really? We couldn't get the scope past the 2 tumors that were in your colon. We've done biopsies, and I'm telling you right now, and then there was this pause. And then he looked at me and said, you have cancer. Do you ever have one of those moments where you know that your life is not going to be the same after that? That was that moment for me. Everything at that point seemed to go in slow motion, and time seemed to stop. It led to more doctor's appointments. It led to a surgeon's appointment. And the next week, I had colon surgery. Turns out, I had stage 3 colon cancer with no history of cancer in my family. So everybody was quite surprised at all that. So, started chemotherapy. Kind of a long road, a lot of dark days in there. One of the darkest days I had during chemotherapy, my 13-year-old dog died. At that point, I just needed a break. Like, okay, I need a break from my wife. I need a break from my small son at the time. I'm going to go to a movie. So there was this movie out called The Rookie. It was a baseball movie about a 39-year-old guy who's a high school teacher who takes a second chance at becoming a professional baseball player. It was fantastic. It was exactly what I needed to see at the time because it gave me a new passion, a new fire in my eyes. I left the theater with a new saying of never say never. Anything is possible. During that last month of chemotherapy, I decided I wanted to mark it with something big. How can I celebrate this big event? Well, I saw an ad for the Chicago Marathon. Not really a big runner, but I figured it's not for another 5 months. I got plenty of time to do this. So, went to the running store, got myself a pair of shoes, talked to a friend of mine that was a running coach at the local high school, got a plan together. I'm ready. The day of the marathon, I learned a bunch of things. First of all, 26.2 miles is really far. So, I started out too fast, hurt my knee, limped around, took forever. But I finished. So, at least I can say I did it. But it was after that I knew that I'm never going to be a fast runner. I'm never going to qualify for Boston. But if I could inspire other people somehow through me torturing myself for a day, maybe that's my calling. So I was back to work as a firefighter, going according to my plan again, falling back into the same old mindset of I've got that tight control on my plan. Then another page turned. I got divorced. That was it. It was at that point someone told me an expression. When God wants to get your attention, he throws a pebble at you. If you ignore the pebble, he throws a rock. If you ignore the rock, he'll throw a brick. If you ignore the brick, he'll dump the house. So, having gone through brain tumor and colon cancer and a divorce, the thought of having a house dumped on me really didn't seem all that appealing at the time, so I give. Shortly after that, another firefighter suggested I go to his church. I'd been by that church a million times, driven by it. Okay, I'll go. At some point, I got steered into this one parking lot, and I got out of my car, and I see people walking that way towards some buses, and people walking across the street to go to the church. Well, right then, this girl gets out of her car, and I ask her, am I going the right way to get to this church? She's like, yeah. So I walked across the street with her, and she kind of showed me around the church. She says now that I had a look of a lost puppy that day. But she showed me around the church, and then after the service, we were standing out by our cars again, and we were talking for a long time. I told her everything that happened that got me to that point in the parking lot that day, and she's just standing there with her jaw wide open. So she gave me her number and said, I know you don't know anybody here, so if you have any questions about the church or anything, give me a call. So, okay. So the next day I called her. We started talking about the church and just life in general and things that happen. A couple months later, we started dating. It was at that point that I started to embrace the concept that God may have had an angel waiting for me in the parking lot that day to show me, let go of your plan, because I've got a better one for you. So shortly, about a couple years after that, we got married at that same church. Then, in addition to my son from our first marriage, we had a set of twins, a boy and a girl. And as if that wasn't crazy enough, we had another kid. So, there I was, having all these things happen. Well, in 2007, I wanted to celebrate 5 years cancer-free. Some people might go on a cruise, go out to a really nice dinner. Not me. I signed up for a triathlon. Never done a triathlon before. Kind of like that marathon thing, but what could possibly go wrong? So I had some friends of mine that did an Ironman triathlon in Wisconsin. Sounds good, I'll sign up. Turns out, Ironman is a 2.4-mile swim, followed by a 112-mile bike. Then you run a full marathon of 26.2 miles. Well, it took me all 16 hours to finish this thing, but I finished. It was truly an amazing experience. Earlier I said you should never say never, and here's why. When we embrace and hold on tightly to our plan and our plan only, we're going to miss some great opportunities for ourselves. We need to embrace the concept that there's other things going on according to our plan. And sometimes sidestepping things is really the plan if we embrace it. If somebody would have told me when I was 22 years old that I was going to have a brain tumor, colon cancer, get divorced, run a marathon, a triathlon, I never would have believed that. Never. But here I am, 15 years cancer-free, married to my wife now for almost 10 years. I have 4 kids. I'm training for my second Ironman and my 25th marathon. And if anybody here is thinking that they could never do that, I'd suggest you take a good look at this. Hey, if I can do this, anybody can. My favorite Bible verse is Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I try to embrace that verse as much as I can because it gets me off of my plan and onto God's plan. We may not see it in its entirety as it unfolds, but the more we hold on tightly to our plan, we can't embrace what's really out there. When we embrace the unexpected, anything is possible. So I'm encouraging you to never say never because it truly does open the door to other things. Thank you.